Council to order, please. It is 6 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. It's 6 p.m. Call this meeting to order, please. A regular meeting of the Fairfield City Council. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Bertani?
Here.
Councilmember Moyes, absent. Councilmember Panduro? Here. Councilmember Tim?
Here.
Councilmember Tonneson?
Here.
Vice Mayor Vaccaro?
Here.
And Mayor Price.
Here. And we have a quorum. And I don't see Pastor Ledoux from the American Samoan Church, so Councilwoman Bertani, would you be kind enough to do an invocation for us, please?
My pleasure, Mr. Mayor. Let us pray. Lord God Almighty and everlasting Father, thank you for bringing us in safety to this new day. Protect us with your mighty power, God, that we may not be entangled in sin nor be overcome by adversity. And in all that we do, direct us to the fulfilling of your purposes for our lives. Bless our residents, bless our police officers, bless our firefighters, bless our city staff. Bless this council, Lord, to do the right thing and to have the internal resolve to make sure that your will be done. It's in the name of Christ Jesus, our risen Lord and Savior, we pray. And everybody said, amen.
Amen.
Councilwoman, would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance also, please?
Put me to work tonight, Mr. Mayor?
Absolutely. And we'll begin with council reports, please. Councilwoman Panduro, would you like to begin?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to talk about a little bit of what I've been doing with the Fairfield Suisun Rotary. So as a part of Rotary, every Monday we do Meals on Wheels. And so I've had the honor and privilege to be able to participate at least 2 hours on Mondays delivering Meals on Wheels to our senior population. And I just wanted to encourage those out there that have the time and ability to do so. It's such a much needed service for those who are homebound. And I've been able to make, great connections with these folks. And it's a great way to just, especially during these times, to make sure that they have a contact with another person. A lot of them are homebound and they don't see any other person during the week except the person delivering their meals. And it's also a great way to learn about all the different neighborhoods we have here in Fairfield. I've gotten to see a lot of different neighborhoods that didn't know existed and complexes, and just, it's just been a really great way to connect with a different population. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Tonneson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of things tonight. I wanted to ask the council, I want to agendize a couple of items, and I wanted to run it by the council. The mayor and I visited the tennis courts today at Allenwood Park, and they're in disarray. So I'd like to see if we can agendize looking at maybe doing some patchwork. I know that, I'm not quite sure what phase they're in, but we're doing a bunch of different phases on Allenwood Park, and we are going to be spending millions and millions of dollars to fix that up. But I'd like to see if I could agendize something to patch the existing courts and get new nets and stuff, just to keep that going for the time being until we do the final phase.
We'll certainly second that, so we'll bring it back for
Thank
council
you.
discussion and perhaps action. Councilman Tim, please, your report.
I have a couple more things too, Mayor.
Well,
And if I may, Mr. Mayor, I want to make sure that we do this right. So what the staff will do is go back, put this on the agenda, and be prepared to discuss some options there for cleaning up those tennis courts and how we move forward, correct?
And patching and.
Yeah.
But I think, is that something that you and I can talk about?
Sure,
Off.
yeah. So
Okay.
we'll get that on the agenda. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
And then another thing I'd like to agendize, Mayor, or run it by the council, is we're a body of 7 now, so I'd like to entertain having 3 of us that have to bring something forward to place something on the agenda. Right now, it's 2, and I did speak briefly with the city attorney, and that is correct. We can do it with 3. Is that right, Mr. City Attorney?
Yes, that's a council choice. You could keep it at 2, or you could go up to 3, not only because it's a quorum of the council now is 4 with the 7-member council.
So,
I have a comment.
Councilman Berton.
And I would just say, Councilman Tonneson, that when we have things on the agenda, it's an opportunity for the city and our residents to hear about the business going on in the city. And anything that would be an impediment to more open discourse, I generally don't think is a good idea. I mean, in other words, why make it harder to agendize something? Because at the end of the day, what's going to happen is that whatever it is, the public's going to get an opportunity to be privy to information about the issues that we're dealing with. So, I mean, I don't understand, I mean, like, what is the upside of making it more difficult to agendize an item? Why?
Well.
And I'm not trying to challenge you, I'm just asking, like, your rationale for this.
Because then we have 3 of us that are in agreement with something that would want to be agendized instead of 2. I'd like to see more than less. And I think that the public, we're still going to be visible to the public and transparent to the public. And I think that it's a request. I mean, obviously you'll be a no vote, but I'm just putting that out there.
Understood. I'll be a no vote on that.
Everybody else comfortable? It's 3?
Well, again, this needs to be brought back to you
Yeah.
for discussion. So the only question tonight is, are there 2 people right now that want to bring it back for agenda discussion? And if there are two members who would like to consider this, then you'll debate it at a subsequent meeting.
So I'm corrected. Councilman Tim, your report, please.
Well, I
Are we putting-
was curious because, so two of us can agendize if we're going to need three of us going
Yes.
forward. So this should be an agenda item, which should be a discussion that has to be agendized. Circular firing squad, but let's put it on the agenda so we can have a discussion in
Right,
front of the
because,
public.
yes, you can't discuss it tonight.
There's
so-
two of you giving us the head nod, we'll put it on the agenda.
Yeah, and that's happening.
Thank you.
Okay.
And then just one last item, I'd like to pull item number 12.
Pull for discussion.
Pull for discussion, sorry, yes.
Your report, please.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Mayor and my colleagues, instead of me giving a report, what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask us all, especially the people in the audience, for about 30 seconds of silence and think back what's transpired over the last several weeks. I'd ask for a moment of silence for the 13 service members that were killed in Afghanistan. And also, too, just as important, is this is the Remembrance Week for 9/11. And some of you may, I don't know who's watching, some people probably weren't born when it occurred, but if I could have 30 seconds, please, Mr. Mayor.
Absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Mayor, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilwoman Bertani, your report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It will be brief, and somewhat following up on what Councilman Tim just said, and our time for remembrance. At the last Fairfield Clergy Action Network meeting, which is a meeting of all of the senior pastoral leadership of all of the churches in the city of Fairfield, who come together with the police chief, the city manager, other city officials, and myself to talk about ways that the faith community can work in collaboration with the city to help serve our residents and address serious issues that need addressing by the city. At our last Fairfield Clergy Action Network, Colonel Stephen Richardson from Travis Air Force Base attended. He is the chaplain at Travis Air Force Base. And not only did he close out the meeting in prayer, but before he did that, he just gave us some comments about what's going on at Travis Air Force Base and the status of our servicemen and women. And he said something interesting. He said, the hardest part about what they've just experienced, believe it or not, will be coming home. I thought that was interesting. He talked about the difficulty of our servicemen and women in leaving stressful assignments like that and then coming back home to reorient themselves at home. And so I told Colonel Richardson that the city of Fairfield will be very happy to work in conjunction with Travis Air Force Base and to lend any resources at our disposal, period, to facilitate the coming home, that's not even a word, but our troops coming back from Afghanistan. So I just want you to know that those wheels are in motion. We will, through the Clergy Action Network, be interfacing with Colonel Richardson and Travis Air Force Base so that we can bring our troops back home in a respectful and helpful way. And that is my report, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Mayor, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilman Tim, for that moment of silence. And also, all the people that were affected by Ida And actually, in my hometown in New York, I don't think I ever saw floods in the subways like I saw on TV. It kind of freaked me out. I was like, wow, that could really happen. So I think, yeah, we need to remember all the people that lost their homes in a matter of seconds, you know, some of them that lost their lives in a matter of seconds. Also, I wanted to thank everybody who participated in the Tomato Festival. I don't think we've been here since then. So, you know, thank you for all the volunteers, you know, city staff, everybody that put it together. It really went off without a hitch. It was pretty good. I enjoyed it. And the last thing I wanted to say, and I don't know, Mr. City Manager, if I had talked to you about, there was a young man who ran in the Olympics this year for Guatemala named Luis Gravalia, and he went to Armio High School. And Luis's story is very interesting for those who don't know it. You probably read about it in the paper. You know, he was a dreamer. And I worked with his brothers who took a different path. And I can tell you something, what he was able to overcome in his life was unbelievable compared to what a lot of us go through. And the fact that he actually made it to the Olympics, he ran for Guatemala, and he was one of our kids at Armio. I would like to do a resolution for him and maybe try to bring him to the council meeting. I know he goes to northern Arizona. I think he still goes there. But I do know how to get a hold of him. And I think it's a remarkable story. I know he had to get a lawyer to allow him to go to run because of COVID and to be able to run in the Tokyo Olympics. So, yeah, so I'd like to make that as a resolution in the very, very near future, so.
Yes, we'll do that.
Everybody okay with that?
By all means.
Okay.
Thank you.
And that's my report. Thank you.
And I should also like to draw your attention to the importance of Travis Air Force Base on an international scale. It is absolutely astounding how well those troops were able to get the planes in the air that were needed necessarily in Afghanistan. And they too have some problems coming home, as Councilman Bertani talked about. So go out of your way, if you would please, to identify yourself and thank every service person you meet. Because chances are you're going to be talking to some 20-year-olds who are still trying to find out what it's like to come home. And some of them may have some lingering problems. And would also like to remind you that the farmers market continues on Thursday, and don't be surprised when you go downtown and see some new businesses opening. The economy is, I hope, is beginning to make a big turn here in the city of Fairfield. Mr. City Manager, your report, please.
Mr. Mayor and Council, just very quickly, a couple of upcoming events. As mentioned, Saturday is Patriots Day, 9/11. There will be a ceremony out here, just outside the council chambers here in front of the police department that will begin at 7 a.m. It will be a relatively short but very solemn and sacred kind of a ceremony. We want to invite all who can to attend. And then the faith community is doing an hour of prayer at the old courthouse at, I believe that's at 11 a.m. And so they've asked 10 a.m., thank you, at 10 a.m. in front of the old courthouse, county courthouse. They've asked me to just let everybody know you're all invited if you'd like to attend that hour of prayer. And then finally, in 2 weeks, our next council meeting, just as a reminder, will be a relatively condensed meeting. We've tried to front load this meeting, as you've noticed on our agenda, and keep the next one fairly short. As soon as that meeting's over, most of us, I think, are heading up to Sacramento for League of Cities. And as we know right now, it's, even with the pandemic, there'll be strict masking and social distancing requirements, but as of now, the League of Cities is still on. So that's all I have.
Mr. City Manager, we were going to adjust the time on that meeting too, correct?
We can do that if the council gives direction to adjust that time. We'll just need to post a change to it. Is that correct, or are we too late to do that?
Well, for our regular meetings, we have a fixed time into our code, so we could start earlier as part of a special meeting and then kick over into the regular meeting, but our meeting time, it does start at 6 p.m., so we have to actually change our...
The majority of us are heading up to Sacramento for the League of Cities, so... The majority of us are heading up to Sacramento for the League of Cities.
Yeah, so that's the only trouble, again, on how we would schedule this. Again, we could take care of business by noticing a special meeting for an earlier time in the day.
And then would you simply cancel the
Then you
regular
could
meeting?
cancel the regular meeting.
So that's an option if the council wants to do that.
Now, the only thing you can't do is at a special meeting, you can't adopt an ordinance. So if there are ordinances to be adopted, that has to be done at a regular meeting. But otherwise, you could do business as part of a special meeting.
Right now, about the only thing that we think you're going to see on the agenda is probably a consent calendar, public comment, those kinds of things. So there wouldn't be a lot of stuff on that agenda, and Amber's giving me the dirt eye here right now, so there may be some other things here that I'm not aware of.
Sorry, we have the redistricting second public hearing on that day, and if we're changing things, I think I need to renotice the public hearing, and we're going to have to
Okay.
do all that also.
The suggestion, I
Notice for
think, would
6
be then to
PM.
keep it at 6, since we do have the public hearing. But again, we don't anticipate it'll take long.
I, for one, would like to do it earlier.
Yeah, if we could do just the public hearing at 6 and everything before, or we stop the meeting at 6 and do the public hearing at 6, we could also do that. That would work.
Again, it depends on how long your special meeting, what time you want to do that. I'm just saying that if you keep the public hearing, unless you're going through and reposting that needs to happen at 6 o'clock.
I'll withdraw what I was saying. I'm just going to call in.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, your report, please.
No report this evening.
Madam Clerk, do you have a report, please?
I was just going to let everyone know that our second public hearing is next meeting. And also, we have the location for the community meeting for redistricting. It's going to be at the Community Center, Lakeside A, from 6 to 8. So if anyone wants to come to a more intimate thing and talk to the demographer and have maps laid out and just have a more intimate ask question type of meeting, we will be having that on October 7th for everybody. And that's all, Mayor.
Thank you. We turn now to public comments. Madam Clerk, if you would, please, the process.
Are you skipping over the presentation, Mr. Mayor?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Fine by me if you want to.
No, we've got the homeless presentation, Mr. City Manager. Thank you for keeping me straight.
Okay, Mr. Mayor and Council, and I'll keep this fairly brief. Wanted to give the council a quick update on some reorganizations that we have been doing. They've kind of been ongoing restructuring and reorganizing of staff, where things report, how we have that structured, not just in the city manager's office, but across the board here. And that also includes homeless services and how homeless services is impacted by that. This slide, if you can see this, shows what the organization looked like when I first got here in 2020. You'll notice that it's very flat. A lot of folks reporting into the city manager. Every department reported into the city manager, as well as several divisions and special kind of groups and project managers and other things reported directly into the city manager. As we analyzed that, we determined that within the cities and most cities' organizations, you have three distinct areas. You have operations, which consists generally of those things that you do on a day-to-day basis that directly impacts how the city functions. So things like your Public Works Department is part of operations. They're out there keeping roads maintained, taking care of utilities. Parks and Recreation is operations. Community development and those kinds of things. These are all things that fall into the category of operations. The next area you have is what we call support services or administrative services. These are the areas that in essence support those functions that keep the city going. So in other words, human resources provides support to the city staff and to others so that we can conduct operations. Finance is generally considered a support service. IT is generally considered a support service. And then the third area is public safety. And of course, we all know public safety is fire, it's police, it's ambulance services, it's the emergency types of services that we deal with. And so we have taken all of the city's, all of those things that happen in the city, and we've categorized them into these three areas. Now, one of the other things that you'll remember is when we brought David Gassaway on board to be our new assistant city manager, when I interviewed David, and it's been over a year now, I want to say almost a year and a half, time really flies, and David has done a fantastic job, as we all know. When David and I first talked way back when he considered coming here and when I made the offer to him, we had discussed the need to take operations and at some point in the future will roll all of the operations under that assistant city manager. The assistant city manager is really the number two in that chain of command, if you will. He reports directly to me, and when I am unavailable, the assistant city manager takes over. And so we discussed doing that, but we wanted to first have him take over the community and economic development side, which included the newly created Department of Housing Services. And so his title became Assistant City Manager over Community and Economic Development. And so he's played a dual role, both as the Community and Economic Development Director, as well as the Assistant City Manager. And he's done that marvelously, and as things have gelled there, and he's been able to go in and help reorganize and do some things there to improve the services that we've done, we felt that it was time to now add those additional duties to David's plate and remove the back half of his title. So now he is simply the Assistant City Manager, and put all of operations under David Gassaway, which is what we have done. So that assistant city manager is, in effect, if you take a look at the private sector, he's in effect the chief operating officer, which in some organizations is your number two or somewhere close to that number two position. And so David Gassaway now has, if you take a look at the chart, he has the community and economic development still. And I would suggest at some point here in the future, as we continue to move forward, we will likely bring to this city council a proposal to create a separate director of community and economic development, so that David can focus on the larger scale management of all of those departments. We're not prepared to do that just yet, but just as a heads up, that is something that we are looking at and likely will come before you at some point in the future, whether that's later this year or next year. It may be during the budget session. So under David now, we have community and economic development, we have housing services, so that remains the same. And then we have parks and recreation, and we have public works. So those four departments now report to David Gassaway. You'll notice that up here on the left-hand side, there are several, and I can't read that because it's too small for me to see, but you have several other things that are sort of put under administration or city manager's office. Those things are things like your communications or your MOD team, marketing and outreach team. You have in there homeless services. You have, you've got, what else is in there? You've got the executive assistant, the office staff that reports to the city manager. Those kinds of things are right there. Now, homeless services, when I arrived, you'll remember when I arrived, and I'm going to skip ahead a couple of slides here real quick. When I arrived, let's go back. How do I go back? There we go. So when I arrived, homeless services fell sort of under quality of life. There wasn't really a division of homeless services. What we had is we had the HEART team, which is part of Public Works. What the HEART team's main role is to go out and do cleanups of those homeless encampments and those other areas that are impacted by the homeless situation that we have here. And we've got some very dedicated individuals in Public Works that do that, and they do a wonderful job, and it's a very difficult job. And you'll recall that we have expanded that out at your last budget process. We've added some additional resource there, so we have more folks out there doing that. And then we have the HIT team, or the Homeless Intervention Team, which falls under the police department. And these are dedicated police officers that work primarily within those homeless populations. And much of what they do is not just enforcement, but they really are playing a dual role in social work. Getting to know that population, working with them, trying to get those individuals into the right kinds of services. Even some of them are helping them remember to take medications, getting them in to get the right medication prescriptions that they need, all sorts of things, and they've done a phenomenal job with that. But as we've discussed this with the City Council, we recognize that we needed to make some changes there. So I'm going to get into those changes in a minute. But the other thing that we recognized is homeless services really is a function of operations. It's not a function of support services or administrative services. It's really not a function of public safety. It's a function of operations. And as we look through the operations, the different departments within operations, the one that we felt best mirrors what homeless services does is the housing services department, where you have the low-income housing and the housing authority and those kinds of things. And we have a very, very competent, very capable housing services director in Latan, and he's done a marvelous job since he came on board. And so we determined that housing services really is the appropriate location for homeless services to go, because there is a lot. Now, there is still going to be tie-in with other departments. You're still going to have that cross-flow work that's going to be happening with the police department, with the HIT teams, with the HEART teams, the cleanup teams, a lot of work with the county and with other agencies and nonprofits and the faith-based organizations, et cetera. But the appropriate place that we and that I have felt that they really need to be is within that housing services department, which ultimately all reports into me anyway. So here you have I wouldn't call it restructured, the added upon homeless services division. And this again is based on what you approved in the budget. You show there that you'll have that division manager position, and under the division manager, again, you've got the HIT and HEART there on the side that they work with, but we've added 4 homeless outreach coordinators, if you will. Now, those coordinators, those outreach positions, their job will in essence be to be out in the homeless community on a regular basis. They may be keeping case files, if you will, of the different individuals that are there, understanding who they are, keeping track of what those individual needs are, because when we look at the homeless community, each individual there is a little bit different. Their needs are different. Some are suffering from addictions, others are suffering from mental illness, some are just they're depressed, they're down in the dumps, they lost their job, they're just really struggling with life. These are human beings that just are struggling. And so these individuals are focused on them. These outreach folks are focused on them and how to get them put into the right areas or get them the right kind of help. Because, again, every case is going to be a little bit different. That will help take some of that off of the plate of our excellent law enforcement officers who are out there on a regular basis working with them. They'll still be very involved. There's a real need for enforcement there that's going to be there. They will assist and help out with that, but adding these 4 folks that are focused in on the homeless outreach is important. There's a statistic, and I'm going to ask the chief to correct me if I get this wrong, that when a law enforcement officer engages with a homeless individual, it takes 77 contacts with that homeless individual before that homeless individual will accept any kind of help. If we send out a social worker or an outreach person that is trained specifically to help those individuals out, that is not in a uniform like that, it's 11. It's 11. That's a huge difference. Now, that's not to say that the police officers are not doing their job, but we know that those officers there, oftentimes in uniform, that's very intimidating to some of the homeless folks, and it's intimidating to a lot of folks. And sometimes you want them to be a little bit intimidating. That's part of their job. Although these are absolutely some of the best and finest that I've ever worked with. But they have a specific area of focus, and so bringing in those coordinators, we believe, will make a significant difference. And so that's the direction that we're going. Now, there is also been some talk about a change in the leadership of the Homeless Services Division. And that is true. We are currently advertising for a new Homeless Services Division manager. Don LaBar has done that job wonderfully for the last year and a half since I got here, and has done a tremendous job. Within the city manager's office, and we had talked about this and you'd approve this, we talked about the need for us to be focused in on our legislative agenda, working with not only state legislators, but with our federal legislators in Washington, D.C., especially as we see earmarks coming back and opportunities to get some money funneled down here to our city for our specific needs. We really need to have a focus on those senators and congressmen that represent us in Washington, D.C., as well as working with those different agencies, whether it's the Department of Transportation or whatever it is. It's what I've done in other cities. We've had this, and it's worked very well. And so I had approached Don LaBar about that and gave her an option, said, you know, we need to create this kind of a position. We believe the title of the position, what we've discussed and decided, would be the assistant to the city manager. Now, a lot of times when you say the assistant to the city manager, people think, well, that's an administrative assistant position. That's not what that is at all. It's a common position within city governments. It works directly for the city manager, out of the city manager's office. It's a management level position. It's oftentimes, in my profession, when I finish off a master's degree like an MPA, generally what happens is you'll go out and work for a city maybe as a management analyst or a financial analyst or something like that is generally your first job after you get that MPA. Soon you want to try to get into what's called that assistant to the city manager position at some point. That's what you aspire to get into, because it teaches you all about, you have the opportunity to work very closely with the city manager. You're involved with special projects, some of the most high visibility projects that the city is engaged with, that individual leads. Works very much with community outreach, works very much with all of your nonprofits, some of the most critical or high-profile relationships that we have in this community. That assistant to the city manager takes a leadership role in those. And so that's the role that Dawn has chosen, and I have offered it to her. And when we bring in a new division manager, once that new division manager is in place and knows what's going on and is comfortable, Dawn will shift into that assistant to the city manager position, doing some of that real critical stuff. She'll still have some roles to play with homelessness because of the outreach stuff. So it's pay grade wise, it's very much a lateral move based on the responsibilities and the things that it'll be doing. It's a much broader, much more inclusive kind of a role. So that's what I have. Are there any questions for me on that?
Mr. Vice Mayor, go ahead, please.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for the report. I'm kind of surprised we discussed personnel, because we usually don't in open session like this. And I do want to say that, you know, your remarks about David Gassaway, what he's done, you're right, he's done a great job. I couldn't disagree with this more, and I'll tell you why. Personally, homelessness is the biggest problem we have in our city right now. To take it out of the city manager's office, to me, is a mistake. Because, and I don't know if anyone in the Fairfield administration cares about what's going on in the 2x2 committee that Doris and I are on, but I can tell you that other members of that committee are not happy, you know, with this move. And I'm not talking about the personnel issue. I'm talking about moving it out of the city manager's office. Because we are really making progress. And I feel like this will impede progress. It might stop progress. And this is something we've been working at. When I ran for city council, that's something that I ran on, that we would talk about that. And we would really concentrate on homelessness in this city. To me, this is a step back, not a step forward. Because we really need to concentrate on it. To lose it in housing, to me, because that's kind of what I think might happen, is a mistake. And, I appreciate the report, like I said. I just know that we are starting to finally discuss this, as a regional issue with support. And these are meetings that are set up, items that are discussed. I just don't see that happening right now if there is going to be this kind of a change. And I just have a real problem with it. I understand that it's not, you have the right to do this. I totally get that. But I think you also have to listen to council too, and what our reservations are. And if you care, if you don't care, okay, you're going to make that decision. I'm telling you how I feel about it. And I just, and I'm going to, obviously it's your decision, but I am going to, monitor it and see how it goes. And I think as elected officials, that our job is to monitor what goes on in the city. And this, kind of, I'm a little bit surprised by it, just because I think, and it's not a personnel issue, like I said, it's a department issue. I really feel like homeless services should be its own department. It's the #1 issue in our city right now. And you take any survey, you look at any survey out there, they'll tell you that homelessness is the #1 issue in our city. So to put it in another department, I think is totally wrong. I think it has to stand on its own. But that's my opinion, and it's a strong opinion, and I'm not going to waver from it.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions for the city manager? Councilman Bertani, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor, for your comments and your leadership. I agree 100%. I've had this conversation with the city manager, and I would just like to add on to what the Vice Mayor said, in that this is really, in my opinion, a matter of policy. This is not in terms of relocating and derogating homeless services into the bowels of housing down here on the list. I think that is part and parcel of really derogating this city council's policy decision to prioritize homelessness as a matter of business in this city. We have had homelessness as a policy priority for decades, and for a good reason, because we're talking about not just the homeless, we're talking about human beings. Mm-hmm. We're talking about homeless children. We're talking about homeless families. We're talking about, all of this in the midst of a pandemic. So, number one, the only thing I would disagree with the Vice Mayor on is I question the authority of the city manager's office to diminish a policy objective that we've had for years. That's one point, and I guess I can ask the city attorney to weigh in on that. Go right ahead.
So the council each year sets policies for the coming year, and those are the policies to guide the city. But under the city manager form of government, the actual administrative service itself, which are the departments, is under the control of the city manager. So, and therefore changes in the departments and how they're organized is a city manager decision. And if we go back in time in Fairfield, going back to, since I started with Kevin O'Rourke and then Sean and David, Each of them did do reorganizations of their departments, and that was what they did. They didn't have the council approve it. So again, I mean, the council is giving policy direction as to how much emphasis should be placed on programs, although the ultimate decision administratively of where the personnel are located at would be a city manager decision. I mean, at the end of the day, you end up judging how the city's being administered, through your own monitoring and of programs, and that's what you give direction on. But administratively, the decision is made for the department makeup by the city manager under the city manager form of government.
So thank you for that clarification. And with that said, I still 100% disagree with this reorganization. And I think that my second point is that, I think it will have an exponentially disruptive impact on the provision of these services and on the progress that we have made. Losing Don and losing the posture of this issue being directly in the city manager's office. Again, I mean, Mr. City Attorney, I appreciate your answer. I just really struggle with how this can be solely a city manager's decision when it is about a policy matter that is of vital importance to the city. So I'm not going to have you answer again. I just want to make myself perfectly clear on this record that I just don't understand what I'm calling a shift in policy. Because that's what will result, is a shift in the policy that we have clearly given for decades to our city manager on homelessness. So the last thing I'll say is I don't understand your why. What is your why? We're doing great. We finally found a rhythm. We finally made the connections, and that's what this job is all about. And I know Latan is great, but Latan doesn't have the resources that Don has in this city. Let's be honest and face that. It's tremendous. So this job is about relationships. All due respect, Latan, but you're new. And Mr. City Manager, so are you. You're new. And we've been in the trenches. We have been in the trenches. We've taken the hits. We finally have a system that is working. We're finally making, inter-county progress. We're finally, collaborating with the county supervisors. We're finally have put the fertilizer down, and now we're seeing a harvest. And I think this is, to me, an analogy is just burning it down. What is your why? On the scales of cost benefit, I do not see how the benefit of this reorganization outweighs the risk of detriment that could happen precipitously with Don not being at the helm, and this issue not being directly a part of the city manager's office. So I apologize for the length of my comments. I'm 100% against it, 100%. And I would hope, Mr. City Manager, that you, since you report to this city council, I would hope that you would take under advisement our concerns and our recommendations, because we've been here through it all. We've been here. So I'm looking forward to comments this evening, and I will chime back in when appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other comments, colleagues? Councilman Tim, please. Councilman Panduro, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with my colleagues. I understand that it's a function of operations, but at the same time, I have cause for concern that it would impede the progress of the 2x2. I know that I'm also new, but not new to this community. And so I have been watching and I've been paying attention and I've been here. It's not like I just showed up on election day. So, I know it's such an important department. It is a priority in our city. And I think that we do, our recommendations and our voices, they matter in regards to where homelessness lies within our city and what the city wants with regards to that priority. And I think the question that I would have is, in terms of this proposed structure, how would it be tracked in terms of if that was the best move for the city? How does that, what would that look like in terms of having accountability with regards to changing the structure? How does success look like? If that, how do you see if it's a good idea or a bad idea? And that's just a question that I've been thinking about to myself with regards to once a change like this happens. What does that look like? Does it look like the 2x2 failing? Does it look like, I don't know. It's just a question that I think that I'm thinking about as well. Thank you.
Any other comments, colleagues? Councilman Tim, please.
Yeah, thank you. 1986, I'll turn the fan down. I was a police officer here and we started to get homeless issues, and lieutenant comes to me and says, we have homeless people and handle it, and we're kind of like, huh? Right? Because the Solano County had opened up a day center, and it just snowballed from there. Now here we are today. I agree with my colleagues, but one of the things that I disagree with, respectfully, is we hire the city manager. The city manager hires everybody else in the city. And what I want to make sure is that our council doesn't get to the point where we start dictating who fills what position, because that's why we have you. I wouldn't dare to say, I want this person to be the chief of police or the fire chief or public works director or even anywhere in those categories. But I will say is that in listening to the vice mayor and my other colleagues is that we have come now so far, and I give you the benefit of the doubt because it's been a year and a half, I guess, that you've been here, but we've lived through it. And what Ms. Bertani said is, this is the number one issue that we get creamed for. 5 emails, 8 emails a week probably, what are you doing about the homelessness? And everywhere you read, you go on social media, it's homeless this, the council doesn't care. No, the council cares. We spend a whole bunch of money. We spend obviously a whole lot of time on this. And when I say we as a council, we get direction, we get information from city staff, and city staff cares. We now spend millions of dollars on this every year. The point I'm trying to make is we are now to a point where we have partnerships, real partnerships with the city of Vacaville, the city of Vallejo, the Board of Supervisors of the county. We never had these partnerships before. And if you call up and people know that you work under the city manager's office, that's kind of like saying I work under the fire chief or the police chief. It denotes not an air of superiority, but an aura of confidence, and you have the ability, if you say something, you know that the city manager or your boss has backed you up. I'm willing, I wish we had the money, and I will look into this. Homelessness is not going away. We will never cure it. We can try and manage it, but we are almost to the point now, this needs to be a division.
It's a division now. Are you talking a department?
Well, a department, yeah, perhaps I was wrong. You have police department, fire department, you get a homeless department. And the reason is you talk about legislative avenues that we want to explore. Like I said, this isn't going away. So we need the money, we need the partnerships, we need the grants. And who you put in charge of that, sir, is absolutely up to you. You will pick the best person, and like I said, I don't think we should get involved in that. But as far as moving it out of the city manager's office, I know you want to lighten your load. I get that. Mr. Gassaway, you guys are doing great work. But I said something to somebody about a week ago, and I said, well, let's give the city manager the benefit of a doubt. Let's see what he has in mind. And what that person told me, and it stuck with me, is it's working so well now, if it goes sideways, nobody's going to blame the city manager. Everybody's going to blame the city council. And you got to admit, I mean, facts are facts. We are elected by constituents. We are elected by the citizens of this town. And how could we say, well, we tried something different? Man, this is working. Let's just build on it. So I guess what I would say is, please give consideration to keeping it in the city manager's office. I think that's where it belongs, whether it's policy, not policy. I think the direction is clear, and from my colleagues, is that's where we'd like it. And then how do we improve? How do we improve it? And if it's more money, or we have new positions, which I salute you for, because I would assume that it's going to involve mental health and case managers. So this will expand, and I think it needs to be under your leadership. Now, whether it slides off to Mr. Gassaway, it's got to be in the city manager's office. So that's my feeling. Mayor, thank you. Mr. Chapman, thank you, sir.
Councilman Tonneson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm going to echo the council's comments. It's been no secret. Me and you've had many discussions. It's a move that I disagree with. I'm taking my notes here. It's the connections. We have forward momentum. I agree with homeless being its own department. I represent District 2. We are probably, between me and Doris, we have the majority of the homelessness in the city. We make one call, and we all know who that call is to when we need something done on homelessness. And I would like to see it stay in the city manager's office also. Or its own division, its own department.
Well, clearly, we're facing a conundrum of reality that is working in some instances and may or may not work in other instances. So we need to proceed very cautiously, what we're directing the city manager to do. And the policy element, as the city attorney explained, is a very key one. So, any other concluding comments? Mr. Vice Mayor, please.
Yeah. I just want to echo real quick what Councilwoman Pandoro said about the 2x2. And if it does start to fail, we're the ones on that committee. And, we need the assistance of our city. Now we have the assistance of other cities. We finally have the assistance, we're starting to get the assistance of the county. And that's my real concern. That's why I really believe it needs to be its own department. Besides the fact that it's the #1 issue in our city, because it really is. You could say a lot of other things, and I know they're just as important, but just like Councilman Tim said, that's what we hear about all the time. That's what we see. So I'll tell you right now, there's no way, and I'm sure that Councilwoman Pandora feels the same way, that we're going to allow that 2x2 to fail. Whether the city wants it to see it go down or not, and I'm not saying you do, but that's my fear, that you need to listen to us also, who are working with the other cities and the county and all the agencies involved, because right now I'm not so confident that that's happening, but I know that we will fight to not let it fail. So.
Mr. Mayor, I do want to respond. I think it's fair because a lot has been said, and I think it would be fair to at least address some of the concerns and questions that have happened, if I'm allowed to. I truly appreciate the comments that are made and the concerns that you all have. You're right, I work for you. I am hired by you. I can be fired by you. I work at the pleasure of the City Council. I am under contract. You need not cause or anything else to say we want different leadership. As a city manager, when you're placed in a position of leadership and you work carefully every day with a dedicated staff to figure out how to accomplish those priorities that have been established by the City Council, as well as other priorities within the community, you're focused on what is the most effective way to do this. Not only an effective way today, but how do we take this now to the next level and to the next level and to the next level? You're right, we've seen a lot of progress in the last year and a half that I've been here. Am I going to take some credit for the leadership of the progress that's made? You bet. Part of that leadership was bringing Dawn LaBarre on board to do this. She wasn't involved with homeless services until I brought her on board. And she has done a fantastic job. And this isn't a personnel discussion other than to praise members of my staff. I would never get into a personnel discussion here openly if it was to lump criticism or anything like that. That's not appropriate. The city attorney sitting right next to me would put the hook on me really quickly. But I'll absolutely praise members of my staff. We have a staff that is second to none. We have built an executive leadership team that is second to none, and it continues to build with the addition of a fantastic IT director that will be joining us in October. We're doing the right things. But part of doing the right things is knowing that when you get to this level, how do we get to the next level? I can be satisfied with where we are and think that, okay, we'll continue to make progress, and we will. Or you can take a look at the structure of your organization and the resources that are being put in and how to get that now to the next level and the next level and the next level and beyond. And one of the toughest things about being in this type of a leadership position is sometimes, with all the research that I've done and talking with members of my staff and getting down into this, we realize, and I realize, that a decision needs to be made that's not going to be popular. But it's the right decision, I believe firmly. I'm as set and committed to the decision that I have here as you are in disagreeing with it. And more than anything else, I know that if it fails, whether it fails because of this decision or if it fails for other reasons, whether that's 2x2 or anything else, it doesn't matter why, I will take the blame for that. And likely the blame is going to be because of the restructuring. This doesn't lighten my load, Councilmember Tim. It increases my load. The easy choice for me to do would have been to just leave well enough alone. But when I interviewed for this job over a year and a half ago with you, we talked about this exact crossroads happening. And I hope you remember that discussion. And I made it clear then that sometimes the decisions that I make may not sit well with you. Sometimes they won't be popular, but I will never take this city down a road that is bad for it, that is destructive. This is a risk for me professionally. This could make or break my time here as your city manager. If we succeed, and it will succeed, you're not going to talk about my decision here. We're all going to just celebrate it and cheer. If somehow, and it won't happen, but if somehow it fails, you're darn right it will be my fault, and I'll accept that blame. And you'll be looking for a new city manager. I have every confidence in the staff. This isn't being delegated to a lower level. The art of great leadership. I learned this as a young military officer with a great colonel who became a 3-star general, General Michael Gould. Taught me that art of delegation. The art of delegation isn't handing this off to somebody else so that you don't have to do the work. The art of delegation is establishing great leaders under you, mentoring them, building them, training them, giving them an opportunity to succeed, praising them when they do well, being careful in your criticism, and helping them get better. But you are always accountable. When you delegate, you never pass off that accountability. It is always there. I would not take this out of the city manager's office if I felt like it was putting a lower priority on it, because I know full well the priority that you've placed on it. This is one of those opportunities where I ask you to trust me. I have more to lose here as well. But it's the right thing in my mind to do. It is the right thing to do, and we will succeed even more by doing this way. I believe that we'll see more resources going out, more outreach with 2x2. That's the very reason we're creating that outreach, that assistant to the city manager position, because it is so key to beefing up outreach even more. And yes, whoever fills that position, if Dawn LaBarre wants it, it's hers, and she has told me she wants it, will be incredibly involved in that outreach. Not walking away saying, I don't do homelessness anymore. Still very involved. I promise you I will go back and sit down and consider everything that has been said here. But I also am going to do what I believe is the best course of action for this organization that I have been delegated by you to do. You're right, you don't lose that accountability either. You are accountable for what I do. So you get to fire me if it doesn't work. But I believe firmly that this is the right course of action. And if it isn't, I'm not so proud that I won't reverse it and say, that's not working. We need to put it back. I've made mistakes before. This isn't one of them. But I will go back and take a look at that, because I understand there's politics involved with this, and that's not a bad thing, by the way. Politics is what drives us here in the city. You have constituents that are looking at you and talking to you every day, and you are accountable to them. And you need to make sure that they're being listened to. And that's what I'm talking about when I talk politics. I'm not talking about a negative thing here. That's good. I love the phone calls and the emails that I get from John when it comes to the finances, because I know I have a citizen out there that cares. Whether we agree or not, that's wonderful, and he keeps pressure on you. That's great. That's going to continue to happen here. So I promise I'll go back and take a look at that, but this has been well thought out, and we'll continue to move forward with what we believe are the right decisions, and I'll consider the comments that we're making. That's all I have, sir.
We turn now to the process for public comments. Madam Clerk, if you would, please.
Persons wishing to address the City Council on subjects not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the Council may do so at this time. The Council cannot discuss or take action on matters not on the agenda for this meeting, but Council members may briefly respond to statements made or questions raised by the public, ask for clarification from staff, refer the matter to staff, request staff to report back to the Council at a subsequent meeting, or place the matter on a future agenda. To speak on an agenda item, please complete a speaker's card and give it to the city clerk before the meeting, or at the latest prior to the time for public comments on that item. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes per item. When joining via Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature or press *9 on your phone to request to speak. You will be called on by name and have 3 minutes to speak. And we'll do in person first, and then we'll go to Zoom. And first speaker is Jean Ahu. You want to go? Okay. Do we have any Zoom public speakers?
We do not.
Okay, thank you.
We don't have anybody in the office.
No public comments tonight.
In these facilities right now who wants to speak? Nobody has? Okay, thank you very much. We move on then to the Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
All right, read this. The holding of a joint meeting on the City Council and Housing Authority entitles the council members to receive additional compensation of $35 for attending this joint meeting. Commissioner Bertani.
Here.
Commissioner Moy is absent. Commissioner Panduro.
Here.
Commissioner Tim.
Here.
Commissioner Tonneson.
Here.
Vice Chair Vaccaro.
Here.
And Chair Price.
Here.
All right, and then we have new business, Resolution HA 2021-10 of the Fairfield Housing Authority, authorizing the executive director or his designee to enter into and execute formation documents to enable the formation of a nonprofit public benefit corporation to be known as Fairfield Housing and Community Development Corporation, and updating the fiscal year 2021-22 budget. And we have Latan Jones.
Good evening, Commissioners of the Housing Authority. Latan Jones, Director of Housing Services. This evening, we are soliciting your approval to allow the Executive Director or his designee to enter into and execute formation documents for the establishment of a nonprofit public benefit corporation to be known as Fairfield Housing and Community Development Corporation. The purpose of the corporation would be to, 1, assist the public entity in development, rehabilitation, acquisition, ownership, financing, operation, and management of decent, safe, and sanitary housing for low-income households. Secondly, to work to eliminate discrimination through access to housing that is void of discriminatory practices. Third, promote social welfare through community-based activities and services targeted toward low-income households. 4, act through a wholly owned limited liability company to own and operate housing. This would generally take place in projects where the corporation would either own or be a general partner of the project. And 5, other activities of the board and public entity that will benefit and support programs that benefit Fairfield citizens. The primary elements defining the operation of the nonprofit are: the office will be listed as City Hall. The corporation will have 5 directors composed of 3 public entity staff members, a representative from the county, and a representative from the community. This arrangement will ensure that mission-critical issues of the public entity are always at the forefront of activities pursued by this entity. Each director, according to statute, will be subject to a term of 6 years. The corporation would have at least 4 officers formed amongst the directors, and that would be a chair, a vice chair, treasurer, and secretary. The corporation would be required to hold at least an annual meeting that would be calendared and designated by the board through a resolution as an official annual meeting. Other regular monthly meetings would not be required, but be calendared and established via resolution as well. Special meetings would be subject to a 48-hour notice. The corporation will initially operate with no staff. However, the corporation will execute service agreements with the public entity to carry out functions of the corporation. Subject to the volume of activities, the corporation may obtain staff such as an executive director or an asset manager, so long as none of those individuals are directors of the corporation. And all directors, with the exception of the ex officio director, and all offices of the directors will be appointed by the designator, which is the executive director of the housing authority. There are many benefits of forming the nonprofit corporation. A few of the most notable are that the nonprofit will help the public entity increase affordable housing initiatives, carry out mission-critical objectives in a more nimble and flexible way to accommodate varying needs, fulfill desired goals, but be shielded from liability associated with actions of the nonprofit, participate in development partnerships with private developers to create affordable and mixed-income housing, and access grants and subsidies afforded to nonprofit agencies to fulfill missions of the public entity. In many cases, when public entities desire to increase development opportunities and expand development capacity within its jurisdiction, many of which create nonprofit affiliates to fulfill these objectives. Goldfarb and Lippman has reported that approximately 99% of the public housing authorities it works with form nonprofit affiliates to maximize development opportunities within their jurisdiction. As you can see, there are a number of housing agencies listed. There are more all over the country. And I'll just pull out a couple. Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency has either developed or are in various stages of development or rehab of over 3,000 units of housing with its nonprofit. Its nonprofit has a 5-member board appointed by the executive director of the Housing Authority. 3 of the members are staff of the authority, and 2 are community members, one of which has real estate development experience. They also have formed 2 other nonprofits. Richmond Housing Authority has used its nonprofit to partner in construction and or rehab of over 400 units of housing. This nonprofit is made up of 3 directors, all of which are staff of the authority. Oakland Housing Authority has used its housing department to build over 1,000 units of housing, many of which was made possible due to the leverage of its nonprofit affiliate. Monterey County Housing Authority has converted or rehabilitated over 1,300 units of housing since 2010. Again, they have utilized their nonprofit affiliate to fulfill those tasks. And the list goes on. Tonight, FHA proposes to follow suit with many of these public entities. As you can see from the list, we would be in good company as we position ourselves with the help of our very experienced legal and fiscal consultants to expand affordable and mixed income housing opportunities within the Fairfield community. I'm available for questions. This evening, I also have Isabel Brown and Minda Hickey from Goldfarb and Lippman that are assisting the public entity to form the corporation and carry out related development activities. We are here to address questions that you may have. Thank you.
Any comments or questions for LaTanya, please? Councilman Tim.
Yeah, thank you. My colleagues may or may not know, I kept Mr. Gassaway and Mr. LaTan kind of busy over the weekend because I had a bunch of questions. And you satisfied them. But the one thing that I want on the record and I want our council to consider is oversight, because once this nonprofit is formed, the city council will have no oversight. And we've discussed the reasons. It's not political, it's a nonprofit. But what I would like to see is 2 council members, a 2x2, whatever, where they have the ability to sit in, monitor, and then report back when needed or as needed, if ever needed, to the council. Because I'm afraid of losing the oversight because, I mean, let's face it, we have big city problems, but we're coming up with big city answers, but I don't want to lose the oversight that ultimately falls back on us. So I don't know if it could be included in the resolution or if it'd have to be an amendment to the resolution or if it even has to be voted on, but.
Councilmember Tim, is the idea that they would not be board members, but they would simply be in a sort of a liaison type capacity. Is that the concept there?
Right, not board members, because then you start putting.
Getting into the Brown Act, so I just wanted to double check that.
Exactly.
So, yeah, so you could have, clearly can create a liaison relationship there. I'm not sure in terms of documentation. I would really refer over to Goldfarb and Lippman, who've put together documentation as to how that would be accomplished. Well, just whether there's a need to amend any of the documentation that's been prepared to date in order to reflect that. That's something we just wanted to double check on.
And ladies, would you use the microphone, please? Thank you.
Yes, good evening. Isabel Brown, Goldfarb and Lippman. So the documents that we've put together are articles of incorporation.
Ma'am, can you get closer to or pull your mask down?
Sure. Articles of incorporation for this entity that will get filed with the Secretary of State, and then bylaws, like for any corporation that govern how this corporation gets managed. So I don't think that we would revise those documents to include, because we wouldn't want to include this as part of the established governance of that nonprofit, but it's certainly, we could have the 2 council members or even report back to this body on a monthly basis what that corporation is doing. So it would be more of a reporting as opposed to a governance issue of the corporation. Is that what you're thinking? So
Right.
reporting as to what it's doing.
Yeah, I'm not talking about a council member being on the governing board, not at all.
Yeah.
You can do your articles of incorporation, but what I'm asking is so everybody knows that there's eyes on, council eyes on, because like I said, once we approve this, then we lose any control over it, unless, and this is to the city attorney, is if we don't like the direction it's going with staff, because you would never come back to us unless you asked for money, probably. But if we didn't like the direction it was going, then we as a council, especially if we have staff members through the city manager's office that are on this board, then we can pretty much just have the same conversation we just had 20 minutes ago with the city manager. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, the board will be independent, though, so again, you can express your viewpoints, right? But you wouldn't have any direct, once it's formed, you wouldn't have any direct ability to expand it. Correct, yes. So,
But let me just put it real basic.
Sure.
If we don't like where it's going, we can tell the city manager, we don't like where it's going, replace the members on the board. We can remove them. They can be fired. They can be removed. They can be whatever. The big thing is again, when the public comes to us, because this is a great project, California Development Corporation, and it's kind of a workaround from redevelopment, and we're trying to find out ways to give housing to people, and I'll never apologize for voting for something like this because it's housing and we desperately need it. My bottom line is the council needs to have eyes on advisory to us only. I don't want them involved in your decisions, but if we disagree with your decisions, we need to know that.
Right.
They would tell us, probably wouldn't tell you, they'd tell us through the city manager's office, which would have, 4 of the 5 members of the board through staff? Is that correct, Stefan?
Yeah, I think that's right. Is that?
It's 3 members that are staff.
okay,
3 out of 5?
Yes.
Yeah, that works for me. So,
all right.
okay, so did I make myself clear to my colleagues? I mean, this is actually a good
Yes.
program.
Yes.
And again, to Mr. Gasway, and to Latan, I gave you 9 pretty difficult questions, and you nailed it. So I'm okay with that.
Any other comments or questions? I have just one.
Yes.
That high number in Monterey County, do you know offhand how many of those were former military units at what used to be Fort Ord?
Actually, I'm not sure of how many were military units. That's something I could find out, but I don't know.
Because there was a big conversion down there over the years. So it would be good for us to know that, particularly in light of what we have here at Travis Air Force Base. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yeah. Thank you very much. Entertain a motion then to approve Resolution Housing Authority 2021-10. It's been moved by Councilman Tim. Is there a second, please? Councilman Bertani. Roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk.
We actually don't have to do that because nobody's teleconferencing.
That's correct.
We're good.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So just
Just
a vote.
we need a vote. We still need to have the vote.
It's not roll call, but we can do a vote.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Ask for all in favor.
Thumbs up.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Good. We'll reconvene the meeting of the City Council. And Madam Clerk, we have the consent calendar, please. Items 1 through 14.
Okay, all matters listed on the consent calendar are to be approved with one motion unless a member of the City Council or the public requests that separate action be taken on a specific item.
And that's pulling item 12 per
Right.
Councilmember Tonneson, right?
Been moved by Councilman Tim. Is there a second, please? Councilwoman Panduro. Okay. And roll call, please.
So all in favor?
Oh, thumbs up is fine. Okay.
We just ask for all in favor and give
Yeah.
price, and then
Yeah.
he knows.
It passes unanimously. Thank you. And now we go to item number 12, please.
Okay, item 12, Resolution 2021-221 of the City Council of the City of Fairfield to establish a public art fund and authorize an adjustment to the fiscal year 21-22 budget. And we have Jonathan Luong.
And before you start, Jonathan, I just want to thank you for putting this presentation together. I know I brought it to you a little late, and so I appreciate your hard work on this.
No, that's quite all right. No problem. Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Thank you for having me tonight. I talk about the art and public spaces. Item 12 specifically is with the funding, but I'm certainly happy to talk about any components of the policy or structure during this presentation. So just to provide a brief overview to the City Council and members of the public in attendance, the general plan of Fairfield outlines an urban design element for public art. And To go further into detail, the Heart of Fairfield specific plan outlines specific strategies and how to implement them. Part of that also went deeper into an economic roadmap that was adopted by council earlier this year, which designated the specific amounts for each category of public art, which I'll talk about in this fund later on. So overall, the objective of this policy and its funding component is to establish a public art fund for the Art and Public Spaces policy to administer the acquisition, installation, and maintenance of public art. And, I have done a lot of research into this, but I always find it very helpful to do a kind of a summary of what other municipalities perform to kind of fund these mechanisms, their mechanisms to fund public art. They may allocate from general funds, from their capital improvement project fund. External sources are fundraising, good old-fashioned fundraising, grants, trusts, and donations from both public and private entities. And to go heavily more into ordinance-based approaches is they'll enact a % for art fee. So I'll talk about that a little more. And then ultimately drawn from AB 1600 fees, which are development impact fees that enable a city to get a certain % from impacts and to mitigate the cost of new development, use that for the benefit of the community or for infrastructure. And so in breaking down kind of what the cost to expect for the city and our community, there are things that are purchasing, of course, commissioning art, whether it's physical or performance arts. Installation is always a key component. I'm actually, Philip Glashoff came out to the city of Fairfield and asked to partner with us to donate part of his collection, and which is a wonderful arrangement. And the logistics behind that is making sure we have the proper funds for installation, because we want to make sure that we're doing right by Mr. Glashoff. So that also includes the maintenance portions of any kind of public art, murals, metal work, elements on the streets, public parks, and then ultimately in the unfortunate but sometimes predictable situation of removal for pieces that may be damaged, eroded, or just worn over time. So how are we sourcing this? We are drawing for this initial seed funding for the Public Art Fund, the urban design fees, which are intended for the landscaping, signage, and public art projects that enhance public perception of the city and create a sense of identity and community. And this is further outlined by Strategy 5.33E in a specific plan. I don't think that's as far as the weeds I'll get into with that, out of consideration for everyone here. But really breaking down the roadmap that we worked with Chabin back in earlier this year, we broke it down to about 100,000 for murals and then 150,000 for a general public art fund. And then at this point, I'm happy to answer any questions by the council.
Comments or questions? Councilman Tonneson, please.
Thank you, Jonathan. In our report, under the structure, under the direction of the city manager, who is chosen and how do we choose those people that are going to be on the Cultural Arts Advisory Committee?
Yes, thank you for the question, Councilman Tonneson. So currently, as it's drafted with this initial framework, the city manager designates the program manager, who in turn selects the committees to the Cultural Arts Advisory Committee.
Okay. And then the selection process, that's worked through there too?
Yes. Because it's a pioneering effort on behalf of the city, and we've all, as a residents and council members and as staff, invested so much into it, we are building off of incremental growth and change with this. And so what I'm doing right now, or what the program manager is going to do, is replicate what we did with the ad hoc committee for the pilot. If you'll see now the mural in Madison, Texas, that is a very traditional city center mural that is serving as a gateway for the heart of Fairfield. And how we did that was I went out and specifically targeted folks from Solano Community College for outreach, targeted folks from Fairfield Sassoon City Visual Arts Association. We had Natalie Ng, who's an artist and member part of our committee. We had Anand Patel and Amanda Karas from Visit Fairfield, who were very invested in growing it economically in downtown. And then, of course, we had a member of staff, Whitney Skillman, who really kept that branding and style approach towards in mind while we were doing it as well. And I would continue to replicate that, and the program manager would continue to replicate that for the community selections.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions, colleagues? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion to approve Resolution 2021-221.
So moved.
Is there a second, please? Second, Councilman Tim. All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you very much. And we turn now to new business. Item number 15, Madam Clerk, if you would, please.
We have the Budget Advisory Committee final report, and this will be given by George Kennedy. And he was the chair. Chair George Kennedy.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. George Kennedy, citizen of City of Fairfield and the state of California, which celebrates its birthday in 2 days, Admission Day. And on behalf of my committee, which did, I must say, an absolute amazing job putting hundreds of hours and hundreds of hours into this final report. We took it from those hundreds of hours down to the final report, which is 120-something pages, and then took it down to 32 pages for this report. And I won't bore you with all 32 pages, but I'll take out some of the highlights of those. So the introduction, we'll have there was an executive summary, the committee charge, our committee members, the startup challenges that we faced. Nope, thank you. The findings and the good news through the report, key observations and recommendations, and the benefits that to the council, staff, and most importantly, the citizens, for the voice of the citizens. We have the budget and financial impacts to that, and then we'll have our acknowledgements. Okay. The key observations contained in this report include the budget process lacks transparency as it relates to the voice of the citizen and the community involvement and input in the establishment of strategic priorities for the city. Need to evaluate the methods and processes for securing the voice of the citizen. Current process appears to be insufficient and requires improvement. Low survey participation, it's not being synchronized with the establishment of strategic priorities, and not in sync with the budget cycle itself. We came into this, as you recall, in November, and we were asked to have our recommendations on the city budget of that specific budget year, which is already passed. The current performance measurement and management process for city departments are either inconsistent, insufficient, or non-existent. For every dollar spent, there should be clarity on the return, i.e. improvements, reduction, capacity, throughput, etc. The key recommendations in this report are to improve the transparency and clarity around how the city council's strategic goals are established, reestablish city citizen communications channels to understand what is or is not effective in gathering the voice of the citizens through surveys, television, radio, phone, website, mail drops, etc. After debt payment is retired on the golf courses and reserve amounts are determined, the additional revenue should be reallocated to youth and senior programs, art and athletics, after school and community-focused information outreach. This is about a year and a half ahead of time, but by this time, hopefully the city will have a plan in place for when that happens. Utilize funds collected from the new cannabis tax for the enforcement of new regulations, drug awareness and prevention, mental health services, homeless intervention, youth services, and public outreach efforts to disseminate the fiscal information. Maintain the current general fund reserve policy rate of at least 20%, but reallocate funds above the 20% to critical priorities and economic opportunities that can create future revenues. The benefits of this is the community representation allows community members' perspective and voice to be considered when decisions for funding are made. You'll have a more involved citizenry. improve communication and transparency between citizens' priorities and the council's strategic goals and funding. It'll also improve the citizen involvement and the voice of the citizen feedback and input, and a process more synced with the budget process cycle. Overall, the Budget Committee observed the City of Fairfield budget appears to be technically solid. However, financial resources could be spread more equitably if a greater level of community input is obtained prior. The purpose, as you charged with us, was to report to the City Council on topics deemed important to the fiscal health of the city, encouraging public participation and input into fiscal decision-making. Through this, there were assumptions made, and the committee made assumptions regarding the resolution to clarify focus areas related to expenditures, revenues, and financial policies, which will help the city improve the citizen participation and further drive accountability and, most of all, greater transparency. I created 4 budget committees. Fiscal budget goals and objectives were based on comments from the council and their directive to review any fiscally related goals and objectives. A transparency and accountability was based on the purpose set by the council to encourage participation of the public and improve the transparency and accountability of the city. The enterprise fund was based on the city council not having adopted a plan for when the debt of the golf courses are paid off, and there is no plan yet on how the cannabis tax funds will be allocated. The comparison budget committee was based on recognizing how City of Fairfield compares to other comparable cities in California. And we use several dozen other cities up and down the state where staff, when they do the local, it's usually, 6 to 7 cities. This committee took, I believe it was 34 different cities into account with similar objectives. And this is to help identify the best practices to improve transparency, accountability, and decision-making. Here's my great committee, and I thank them wholeheartedly for just the amazing amount of time. Some are in the audience, some are on Zoom. We had some life situation happenings that some of them couldn't be here tonight, but we're thinking of you. Startup challenges, there was lack of clarity on the committee's charge, lack of ability to have in-person meetings, developing data and information on a timely basis in order to affect the current budget cycle. And it was totally out of sequence with the review of the budget. Our focus was to advise the City Council, as I went over earlier. Subcommittee formation. The Enterprise Subcommittee charge was to examine the opportunity to reallocate the net revenue from the existing sources and potential sources to community-based goals. Transparency was to examine ways to improve public participation, collaboration, transparency, and accountability in the City of Fairfield's fiscal decision-making process, and research the participatory budget process used by some cities to enhance public participation, collaboration, and transparency. The Fiscal Budget and Goals Subcommittee was to examine the work plan that led to the adoption of the budget, identify opportunities to change those goals and opportunities of the work plans, so they could help guide the fiscal health of the City of Fairfield for the upcoming budget year. It also went deep into recommending how community policing might be reflected in the budget. We understand that there's a lot of resources that are put into community policing, but they're not really, the city doesn't do a very good job of line item these items. So if you just looked at the budget, you would say there's absolutely no money being spent on community policing, but we know it's there. And by having some more line items to show the community what's being done with community policing and some of these other areas, it shows greater transparency and it shows the accountability that the police department and other departments within the city are working for them and doing the things that they may expect instead of just seeing numbers under a larger heading. So, what the appropriate percentage of funding should be for fiscal health in addition to areas such as general fund for seniors, parks and recreation, administration, community development, homeless, and others that the committee sees fit. The budget subcommittee, they compared, as I stated, about 34 different cities and went over all those, and you'll see those here. Technically, we found no significant differences between the city budget processes or content. The City of Fairfield budget appears to be technically solid and well executed. The city manager's office has demonstrated a willingness to support the committee's work and participate in improving transparency of the city's fiscal information and decision-making process. Staff and management were involved in the process, and the police department is doing some great community policing initiatives. Now the observations and opportunities. I'll go over some of these. Amongst the enterprise fund, basically there's only two that we could look at, and that was the golf course revenue and the soon-to-become cannabis taxes. Transparency and accountability, education outreach can improve the public participation and input. Participatory budget is an alternative way for local government to manage public money. It is an open process in which community members decide how to spend part of a public budget and gives community members decision-making power over budget allocations. Community surveys are important to enhance the city's ability to represent the citizens' needs. With social media and all the things that are available today as opposed to just a few years ago, we should be having much greater voices of the citizen and participation than we do. Again, the budget lacks transparency as it relates to the voice of the citizen and community involvement. Fiscal budget goals, the general fund for senior, park, administration, community development, recreation indicates that each are underfunded. Developers have stated that Fairfield has become a harder place to do business with. The complaint is based on the length of time it takes to respond to phone calls, approve plans, costs of permitting, yet the department runs with a surplus. Fairfield has too few parks built for a city the size of Fairfield. The park shortage has been attributed to lack of funds available in the budget for park maintenance. It appears that parks are a low priority for staff or city council, yet in past surveys, parks rank the highest in priorities. The lack of very low and low-income housing poses a significant challenge to seniors and to rehouse families and individuals that are ready to transition out of the shelter system. The increasing number of retiring baby boomers over the next couple of decades will put additional pressure on an already stressed low-income housing system. The homeless population is an increasing area of concern and expense to the city. Ongoing efforts strain the current city staff and structure. And in the appendices, you'll see some recommendations that we have, some programs that are out there. Homelessness is a division within the city manager's office and not a department. Given the priority of the issue for the city and the citizens and lack of department clout could encumber process. Now, this report was given to you back in June. So what you heard earlier tonight, we put this was a great concern of ours. We had many discussions on whether it should be a department on its own. And members, because of the fact that it only have approximately 6 employees, didn't necessarily deserve to be on a director level with other departments. And then my response to that is that's how government operates and not private enterprise. Private enterprise makes things work, and if a department has six employees under it, then they're paid accordingly to 6 employees as opposed to somebody who may have 300 of those. Because our greatest fear was what was proposed tonight. The budget comparison, city needs to evaluate the methods and processes for the voice of the citizen. Current measurement and management processes for city departments are either inconsistent, insufficient, or non-existent. As I stated earlier, for every dollar spent, there should be clarity on the return. Strategic goals and work plans lack clear and identified outcomes of key performance indicators for their success. Recommendations, we talked about enterprise funds a little bit ago. Transparency and accountability, we believe more surveys are necessary to help determine the needs of the citizens. Use future and past surveys in current and future city planning. Establish a participatory budget program and authorize up to $200,000 in the proposed budget to be used for planning, development, and implementation of a priority budget pilot program. Allocate at least $1 million in existing funds towards the participatory budgeting if the pilot program is successful, and incorporate participatory budgeting in the city charter and have resident voters determine the funding priorities. Fairfield's funding process for distribution of community CDBG funds currently includes a citizen participation plan and a steering committee, and is a participatory process. However, the committee recommends that each city council district should have a community member on CDBG committee to have an equal community representation during the funding process. Presently, I believe there's 5 members, and there's 7 of you. We also believe that authorizing the Budget Advisory Committee to be engaged in the pilot program as primary advisory body over program governance, budget implementation, etc. Allow the Budget Advisory Committee to be engaged in drafting and reviewing future survey questions and monitoring the metrics of the survey. Change resolution for the Budget Advisory Committee to be an ongoing committee, and redefine the committee charged with clarity, focus as it relates to budget transparency. I know there's some discussion out there that maybe it shouldn't be continued on. And my committee totally disagree with that. I think what we've shown you is that the importance of this committee, you asked us to be an independent body. It's independent of you, it's independent of the city staff, and we've given you a 100% independent view of the city budget process. Fiscal goals and objectives. Improve the transparency and clarity about how the council's strategic goals are established. The police department budget items, as I said earlier, should be presented with more narrative to properly reflect the stated goals and objectives of community policing that are currently being implemented. The police department should develop a community policing partnership. The cost for this project would be allocated in fiscal 2021-22, and about $200,000 could be taken from the excesses of the budget reserves for the addition of a community relations liaison plus limited consulting services. Maintain the current general fund policy. Consider establishing a landlord partnership program, and it sounds like that's what was talked about a little bit earlier, and allocate a dedicated staff person to administer the program with an emphasis on senior housing. The benefit of increased access to Section 8 housing units will assist in serving the very low income population. And then perform a study to determine if the creation of homeless services department would be advantageous in addressing homelessness. Budget comparison, launched a body of work to research and establish KPIs, chartered police and fire deep dive review to better understand the comparative performance to other similar sized forces. Based on the missions of both the community development and park and rec department, a deep dive evaluation should be conducted to see how both departments are performing against their stated mission and the impact to the community and budget allocation. Increase the frequency of outreach, notifying the community of the services the cities offer to drive more participation for program and services. The benefits for this, it's a new resolution for the Budget Advisory Committee as an ongoing committee with clarity and focus as it relates to the budget transparency with community engagement as the foundation. Increased funding to community-based outreach and interaction programs will improve the quality of and options for all citizens of Fairfield. Improved representation will ensure community members' perspective and voice are considered when funding decisions are made. A survey process and synchronization with the budget cycle will allow a larger percentage of the community to participate in city affairs. Improved measurement and accountability will drive more efficient city operations and work delivery against strategic goals. Improved communication and transparency between citizen priorities and council strategic goals and funding will be a large benefit of this program. Financial impacts that you asked for are here as well. They're all noted. So we found $1 for each dollar we're recommending. And through this, it still comes down to our 2 main things: transparency and accountability. As a thank you, I want to thank the city council members, my fellow Budget Advisory Committee members, city manager and the executive team, Emily, Brian, Ms. Labar, Chief Cantrell, Amber, thank you very much. You guys did, an amazing job. And next step, questions.
Any questions for George? George, thank you very much for the presentation. Okay.
Yeah,
Councilman Tim, please.
Mayor, thank you. I mean, this all came out of, actually, when Pam was the vice mayor, if I remember correctly. You guys did an awful lot of work, and going through it, I wasn't sure where you guys would end up, in a participatory budget thing. I think probably we as a council need to talk about this at a future time, because and I'm not denigrating anything you said, but put $1 million here, but what I want you to tell us is where you're going to take that $1 million from, or 200,000 from. Where's it going to come from? Because if you're plussing over here in this column, you got a minus somewhere else.
Right.
So, and this isn't, I mean, we're not going to decide this in a 20-minute city council meeting, but one of the things that we have is we have workshops, and especially, we've gone to the 2-year budget, but when we have these meetings on a Saturday or a Sunday, and 10 people show up. And I think perhaps then we need to take, obviously, a lot deeper look at this. And what I would ask my colleagues is, when we have our next one, and I don't know when it's scheduled for, Mayor, we can look at that, but there's some very, very good points in here. But also, too, what I would caution you is, do we need more parks? Yes. How much do parks cost? And this is where you'd have the finance manager and obviously staff time, and that runs into a lot of money, but where we get the money from, because everybody has a wish list. And I have a wish list, right? And that's a question finance asked me is, okay, Chuck, where are you going to pull it from? So that's where I would look at this, using the guidelines that you have set up, and we know that your feelings on this, but then it's got to be a lot deeper, more in-depth conversation.
And then that's part of the reason that we really feel strongly that this committee should go on. What we did in just a few months' time was, pretty in-depth, but it was but it's still just a start.
Right.
And the importance of this committee to go on, it helps do a deeper dive into all of these situations. And I know that some people aren't, happy, may not want to see it go on, but I take that as a compliment, because that means we're shaking things up a little bit, and we're asking the tougher questions, and we're not afraid to ask questions with anybody. Well, and we're giving you some of these answers in here. You're asking about the $200,000. Right off the top of my head, right now the budget surplus is at 23%. City's goal is 20%. $200,000 is a lot less than 3%. So there's money in the budget. You got money from from the government for CARES 2 or whatever that Congressman Garamendi touted, and only $10 million of that went to the
went to
the web
broadband. And
broadband. But so there's still a lot of monies out there that if you look here, that were very specific requests. The parks and funding, we didn't specify that money should go towards parks. We just said it was underfunded.
Right, and you've answered, I guess, my question too. Is this involves a lot deeper dive, and it would necessitate a day, 2-day discussion, and if that's something where the council wants to go, and I haven't heard anybody say that they're opposed to not continuing this, because like I said, you put in an awful lot of work, and when Pam Bertani asked for this, it's not a bad thing, and transparency is your number one thing. So, but all I'm saying is that I'd bring it back to council and say, hey, when we go back into our budget process, then for you to be included. But understand, and I'm just telling you up front, is you can want this and want this and want this, but is it one-time money? Is it ongoing money? So not to have anybody's feelings hurt, but it won't hurt ours. We don't want to hurt yours. We just want to all come together, okay? But it was a very, very, very good presentation. You guys did an awful lot of work. Thank you very much.
No, go ahead.
I just want you to know that we understand how many hours it must have taken you all to compile such a comprehensive amount of information. Thank you for that. We don't take it for granted that you've done this work. I am a really practical person, so I like to see real milestones, and I see those milestones in your work. And I agree with Councilman Tim that we as a council need to discuss the propriety of continuing the work of this committee. I mean, this is a heavy-duty lift, all of the information that's before us. But, at the end of the day, my question is, so now what are we going to do with this? Is this going to go on the shelf, collect dust, and be another effort of our wonderful residents who donate their very valuable time to put in the work? What is this city council going to do with it? So I think that it's worth a discussion, like Councilman Tim said, at some other point. But just for now, for you, for your committee, hats off to you. Thank you. On behalf of the residents of the city, we appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Mayor, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, George, thank you for the report. I know that took a lot of time and effort, and as you know, Ed Hawthorne is a friend of mine.
Right.
He's your vice chair, and I know he and I have talked about it and the amount of hours that you guys put in, and I have a lot of respect for everybody who was involved. So I just wanted to thank you for, all the work you put in, and I agree with my colleagues. This is something we're going to have to discuss, at another time and really, dive pretty deep into it, because there's some recommendations here that we really need to discuss. I don't think our opinion should be thrown out. So I think that, once we have those discussions, then we can really kind of get to the heart of the matter. So thanks, George. Really appreciate it.
And George, please tell your colleagues that this really was a blue ribbon committee.
Thank you.
And the in-depth look and the observations and the recommendations will go a long way, I think, in helping the city of Fairfield develop a budget that meets the needs of the citizens who are paying it. So thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you.
George.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had one more comment, Mayor. I just for the people who are listening, they put a lot of work in. George's presentation was 112 pages. There was a lot of work that went into this, and I just want to personally thank you, George, and your committee. That
There's a committee there, like I said, they were an absolutely amazing group of people who were 100% behind it and wanted to, really present something comprehensive to you guys and to the citizens.
And I watched a number of those meetings, and you guys you did a great job chairing that. Thank you.
George, thank you very much. And we turn now to item number 16. Madam Clerk, if you would, please.
Sorry, Mayor, we have a speaker card for that item from Jose McNeil, and I believe he's on Zoom. Brian, can you check and see if he's on there?
What was the name?
Jose McNeil.
You said Jose?
Yeah.
There's no Jose in the Zoom right now.
Okay, thank you. All right, item 16 is first reading and introduction of ordinance 2021-18 of the City Council of the City of Fairfield, amending section 1.7 of chapter 1, article 1 of the Fairfield Municipal Code to allow second and subsequent violations of the Fairfield Municipal Code to be penalized as infractions or misdemeanors. And our speaker is Josh Kresha.
Welcome, Lieutenant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council members, I'm Lieutenant Joshua Kresha. I'm currently assigned as the commander of our Special Enforcement Division at the Police Department. This division consists of our Homeless Intervention Team, our Youth Services Unit, and our Traffic Unit. As you can imagine, these units address quality of life issues that face our city on a daily basis. This ordinance I bring to you tonight seeks to change Fairfield Municipal Code Section 1.7, allowing second or subsequent violations of this code to be charged as either an infraction or misdemeanor when otherwise not specifically stated. The reason we are asking for this change is due to the limitations of infraction-only violations and allowing us to address continued quality of life issues. For many of these violations, increased fines do little in the way of deterrence and do not allow us to utilize all of the resources Solano County and the City of Fairfield has to offer. So I won't read all of this to you. I'd like to draw your attention in the first paragraph, the second line, the violation of such provision of this code or any city ordinance shall be an infraction where no specific penalty is provided therefore. This is how it currently reads. The next paragraph, every violation determined to be an infraction is punishable by, and then you have an increasing amount of monetary fines. What we're proposing is, if we look at the second line of the first paragraph, the first offense of such provision of this code or any city ordinance shall be an infraction punishable by a fine not exceeding $100. And then adding the second paragraph, for a second and subsequent offense of this article within a 1-year period, such violation may be prosecuted as either an infraction or with a fine not exceeding $250 or as a misdemeanor, punishable by a fine not exceeding $1,000 or by imprisonment in the county jail not to exceed 6 months. So the issue is our current penalties versus proposed. So currently with city ordinance violations, no matter what type of violation they are, an officer issues a citation. There's a little box they mark that says infraction, and that is forwarded to the Solano County Traffic Court for disposition. At no time does it go to the DA's office. Regardless, it could be an open container. Citation has nothing to do with traffic. It's going to go, because it's an infraction, it's going to go to the traffic court for disposition. The traffic court does not have the resources or abilities for probation or any of the restorative justice programs that we have here in the county and in the police department, such as diversion, mental health court, or any kind of alternative sentencing. This is a fine only, and so what happens is if you don't pay that fine for that citation, it goes to collections. And unfortunately, many of the people that we issue these citations to aren't concerned about their credit history, so the fines just stack up and there is no consequence or resolution to that. One of the examples that stands out to me today is we have a 57-year-old Fairfield resident. She's had 28 police contacts in the last year. And looking at them, 6 of these incidents were where she was a victim of a violent crime against her. And then she had 6 citations for violations of Fairfield Municipal Code. None of those citations did she appear on. They just went to collections, and there was no way for us, basically at this point, to get her the resources she needs without court intervention. But with these being stuck as infractions, we will never be able to get those resources to her. And with that, pending your questions.
Answer questions, colleagues? Excellent presentation. Thank you very much, Lieutenant. Entertain a motion to waive further full reading and read by title only and introduce the ordinance for first reading.
So moved.
It's been moved?
Yes.
By the Vice Mayor, seconded by Councilman Tim. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Item number 17, Madam Clerk, please.
All right. Resolution 2021-222 of the City Council of the City of Fairfield, updating the compensation for City Clerk and City Treasurer, and first reading and introduction of Ordinance 2021-19 of the City Council of the City of Fairfield, amending Chapter 2 of the Municipal Code relating to compensation of council members, and first reading and introduction of 2021-20 of the City Council of the City of Fairfield, amending Chapter 2 of the Municipal Code relating to compensation of the mayor.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. Tonight, council is being asked to approve a resolution modifying compensation for the treasurer and the city clerk, as well as waive the first reading, read by title only, and introduce ordinances modifying compensation for both mayor and council members. Any actions related to these ordinances would not take effect until the council's new term of office, which is on or around December of 2022. Currently, compensation for elected officials is inconsistent with California Government Code as it relates to population, and is also inconsistent with neighboring cities of similar population. Councilmember compensation or taxable income is $500 a month, and the mayor's income is $600 a month. Both the treasurer and city clerk receive $190 a month. Salaries have not been updated since the late 80s, and since that time, Fairfield's population has grown by almost 60% and the budget has tripled. Of the 7 cities within the county, Fairfield's compensation is the second lowest and is the lowest when compared to those with populations over 75,000. To stay consistent with California government code, which includes a salary up to $600 a month, with increases in the amount of 5% for each calendar year from the date of the last adjustment, staff's recommendation is to increase salaries of council members to $1,300 a month and $1,560 a month for the mayor, and the treasurer and city clerk to $475 a month. Other city benefits, such as auto allowance, would remain the same. These modifications would make Fairfield's compensation, including those other benefits, slightly above Vacaville's, but lower than Vallejo's. So that concludes my presentation tonight, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Comments or questions? Okay. Mr. City Attorney, can we take both of these at the same time, please?
No, we will need to do both ordinances separately. We also have the resolution too.
Yeah,
so
okay.
All 3 items will have to go in order here.
Okay.
So the first action here, if there's no one to speak on this item, the first one is resolution number 2021-222, and it'd be a motion to adopt the resolution.
So moved.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Vice Mayor has seconded. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
The next item would be ordinance number 2021-19, and here would be a motion to waive further reading and introduce the ordinance for first reading.
Entertain a motion to approve. It's been moved by Councilman Tonneson, is seconded by Councilwoman Panduro. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
And the last item is ordinance number 2021-20, and again, the motion would be to waive further reading and to introduce this ordinance for first reading.
Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Councilwoman Panduro, seconded by Councilman Tonneson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Clerk, we go to item 18, please.
Resolution 2021-223 of the City Council of the City of Fairfield, approving the submission of the fiscal year 2020-2021 Community Development Block Grant Program Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And our speaker is LaTanya Taronis.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Council members. My name is LaTanya Taronis. I am before you tonight to propose that you adopt resolution number 2021-223, approving the fiscal year 2021 Community Development Block Grant Program Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation. So that's the CDBG CAPER for submission to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The City of Fairfield is an entitlement city of the HUD CDBG program and receives an annual allocation of funds each year. The primary goal of the program is to provide decent housing, a suitable living environment, and economic opportunities for low-income residents. The CAPER provides HUD with a summary of activities and performance for the CDBG program during the fiscal year. The goals and outcomes for the CDBG program are set during the annual action plan prior to the commencement of the fiscal year. Program goals are set for the program year, but they are driven by the goals and objectives outlined in the 5-year consolidated plan. Fiscal year 2020-2021 is the 4th year of the current consolidated plan. The CAPER is to be submitted to HUD annually within 90 days after the end of the program year, which for the City of Fairfield is June 30th, 2021. The final report is due September 28th, 2021. So here I put together a chart that shows the CDBG allocation for this past fiscal year and the amounts expended. So for entitlement funding, we received $861,865, and the subrecipients of those funds expended $759,455. During the fiscal year, the city also received 2 allocations of CARES Act funding from HUD for projects to prevent, respond to, and prepare for the COVID-19 pandemic. The 2 allocations totaled $1,198,683. Specifically, if we can talk about the second one, the second allocation of the funding was allocated directly towards an eviction prevention program to support Fairfield residents with legal services, tenant landlord counseling, and assistance with past due rents. The program began in March 2021 and will continue through June 30th, 2022. The city also assisted 4 low-income homeowners with housing rehab grants. The total expended funds for the past fiscal year is $1,262,200. Many of the CARES Act programs are ongoing and will continue through the end of the current fiscal year. Here's a chart to break down the allocation of funding for the fiscal year 2020 entitlement grant. So 20% of the grant went towards program administration, 19% towards public facilities projects, 15% went towards public service projects, and 46% went towards affordable housing projects. And I also would just like to note that in terms of affordable housing projects, CDBG funds cannot be used to develop new housing, but can be used to acquire or rehab affordable housing units. This is a breakdown of the allocation for activities for the CARES Act funds. Of the total 1.1 million, 6% of the total allocation went towards program administration, 42% towards different public service activities, and 52% of that funding went towards an eviction prevention program. This slide here shows the results of the entitlement projects and the CARES Act projects as it relates to their goals. 67% of the entitlement projects met their goals outlined in the annual action plan. 30% of the CARES Act programs met their goals outlined. The low number of 30% is largely due to the majority of the funding going towards the eviction prevention program. It did not start until late Q3, so around March. So that the majority of that funding is still in use and will continue to be used through fiscal year 21-22. Staff is making the recommendation that the City Council adopt the City of Fairfield Resolution Number 223, approving the fiscal year 2020-2021 Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report. And I am available for any questions. Thank you.
Any comments or questions? Mr. Vice Mayor, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the report, Latanya. I have a question about the money going to the youth. Do you know how many people applied for that by any chance?
For the youth funding?
Yeah.
So from my understanding, the way that it works, we put out a NOFA on an annual basis that just says, here's a pot of money, this is what we have available, and then we wait for nonprofit organizations or other entities to apply. I was not a part of that during the 2020 fiscal year, but from my understanding, there were only 6 applications during that fiscal year, and so then what happens is it goes towards it goes through a process. So I don't know for sure how many for youth.
Okay. Yeah, and this isn't directed toward you, but I can't vote yes on this because I have an issue with the money going towards some of the programs for youth. I think it should have been spread out a little bit more.
Well, not all of them went to youth.
I know, but I mean, I'm talking about the one specifically. There's 1, 2, 3 columns.
Okay.
Yeah, so no, it's not directed to you. I'm just saying I can't vote for it because I disagree with where some of the money's going to, that's all.
So the money, when the annual action plan came forward, and it would have come forward in fiscal year 2020, this council would have approved what those allocations were for and those funding amounts at that time.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Entertain a motion then to approve Resolution 2021-223.
Mr. Vice Mayor, which ones are you?
The 3 columns, the youth columns.
Yeah.
And Mayor, we want to check to see if there's anyone in the public that wants to speak on this item.
Anyone in the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll.
Do we have any on Zoom, Brian?
There are no Zoom comments.
Thank you.
No comments or questions? Councilman Tim, please.
Yeah, I just have a question. Has this money already been spent? And this is just, it's for audit purposes that we have to approve this because it's already been spent, correct?
Yes, so the annual action plan came forward last year, and it was approved that these monies would be spent during this fiscal year. Now, the CAPER is just a report saying, you've approved this, now this is what we spent and how we measured up towards those goals.
And you've already spent the money, correct?
Yes.
All right, I understand. Mayor, I'll make the motion then to approve.
Been moved by Councilman Tim. Is there a second, please? Councilwoman Panduro, all in favor? Opposed? Motion, so it's 5-1. Thank you very much. We turn now to public hearings.
Public hearing and resolution 2021-224 of the City Council of the City of Fairfield approving the engineer's report and assessment diagram contained therein regarding the annexation of territory designated as Annexation 4, Green Valley Corporate Park Building A parking to the City of Fairfield Landscaping and Lighting Maintenance District Number 13, North Cordelia, and the levy and collection of annual assessments related thereto, commencing with fiscal year 21-22 and resolution 2021-225 of the City Council of the City of Fairfield declaring the results of a property owner protest ballot proceeding for the City of Fairfield Landscaping and Lighting Maintenance District Number 13, North Cordelia, Annexation Number 4, Green Valley Corporate Park, Building A parking, and the levy and collection of annual assessments related thereto and commencing fiscal year 2021-22 and resolution 2021-226 of the City Council of the City of Fairfield ordering the annexation of territory, Green Valley Corporate Park, Building A parking to the City of Fairfield Landscaping and Lighting Maintenance District Number 13, North Cordelia, designation as Annexation 4, and the levy and collect annual assessments related thereto, commencing fiscal year 21-22. And we have Chris Lewis.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Chris Lewis, Management Analyst with the Department of Public Works. Before you tonight is Annexation Number 4 for Landscaping and Lighting Maintenance District Number 13, North Cordelia. This district provides funding for the maintenance of landscaping, lighting, and improvements in the North Cordelia area. The territory proposed for annexation includes approximately 2 acres of land east of Business Center Drive, west of Nitzel Road, and northwest of Interstate 80. Once constructed, the development will be a parking lot. City Council initiated this annexation process on July 6, 2021, with the adoption of resolution numbers 2021-150, 2021-151, and 2021-152. By conducting a public hearing tonight, carrying out the ballot procedure, and adopting the proposed resolutions before you, Council will complete the annexation process and the territory will be added to the district. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Any comments or questions for our presenter? Okay, seeing none, I will open the public hearing. Are there any requests to speak cards?
I have no requests to speak. Do we have anyone on Zoom?
There are no Zoom speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mayor and Council, the first action that would be to adopt Resolution 2021-224.
Is there a motion to approve? It's been moved by Councilman Tim, seconded by the Vice Mayor. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
And before we get to the next resolution, the Deputy City Clerk will be counting the ballot.
It's a yes.
All right, so the next action now with the votes being in favor would be to adopt Resolution 2021-225.
Motion to approve, please. It's been moved by the Vice Mayor, seconded by Councilwoman Bertani. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
And last item is Resolution number 2021-226, a motion to approve.
It's been moved by Councilman Tim. Is there a second? Councilman Tonneson seconded. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Item number 20, please, Madam Clerk.
Public hearing and first reading and introduction of ordinance 2021-21 of the City Council of the City of Fairfield, amending various sections of Chapter 25, Article 1 of the Fairfield Municipal City Code, also known as the zoning ordinance of the City of Fairfield, updating the regulations pertaining to large family daycare use and required by state law, and reestablishing regulations pertaining to garage conversions in all residential zoning districts. And our speaker is Brian Miller.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, members of the council, and the mayor. As the title suggests, this action tonight amends our zoning ordinance largely in response to state requirements. The state has now passed legislation that limits our ability to require special zoning permits, namely conditional use permits, for large family daycare. So we're basically eliminating the distinction between small and large family daycare in the various zoning districts in the city. Of course, the state will continue to regulate and monitor family daycare. I must clarify that family daycare means daycare within a family home. These are not commercial daycare centers, which are not covered by this regulation. The second change is also indirectly related to state actions, namely last year when we amended our code addressing accessory dwelling units. We removed a section of the code dealing with garage conversions because of concern that it would affect accessory dwelling units. Unfortunately, that removed any regulations of all in the zoning ordinance at all of garage conversions. And most garage conversions, the vast majority, are things like adding a family room and adding an entertainment room, etc. Conditioned space that are not really accessory dwelling units. So what we're recommending is just readopting or reestablishing the former zoning code standards for garage conversions. They govern basically how you can do the garage conversion, et cetera. So we're not changing anything that was really dramatically from past practice. We're just making clear that for standard garage conversions, we will apply the same standards we always did in the past, and I can answer any questions.
Any comments or questions for Brian? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing.
I have no requests to speak. Do we have anyone on Zoom?
Okay, we'll close the public.
No one on Zoom.
Thank you.
Sorry? We'll close the public hearing and bring it back for council action. Motion to approve.
Be a motion to waive further reading and to introduce the ordinance for first reading.
So moved.
Been moved by Councilwoman Bertani. Is there a second? Councilwoman Panduro. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. We turn to our item number 20, please. I'm sorry, item 21.
Public hearing and resolution 2021-227 of the City Council of the City of Fairfield, annexing territory Green Valley Corporate Park Building A to Community Facilities District Number 2012-2, Public Safety Services, Open Space Operation, and Park Maintenance, as annexation number 53, authorizing the levy of special tax within the annexed territory and submitting the levy of the special tax to the qualified electors thereof, and Resolution 2021-228 of the City Council of the City of Fairfield, declaring the results of a special annexation election in Territory Annexed Community Facilities District Number 2012-2, Public Safety Services, Open Space Operation, and Park Maintenance, determining the validity of prior proceedings, and directing recording of amended notice of special tax lien for City of Fairfield Community Facilities District Number 2012-2, Public Safety Services, Open Space Operation, and Park Maintenance, Annexation Number 53, Green Valley Corporate Park Building A, and we have Chris Lewis.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Chris Lewis, Management Analyst with the Department of Public Works. Before you tonight is annexation number 53 for CFD 2012-2. This district provides funding for public safety services, open space operations, and park maintenance throughout the city. The territory proposed for annexation is located east of Business Center Drive, southwest of Suisun Valley Road, and northwest of Interstate 80. Once constructed, the development will be an industrial building. City Council initiated the annexation process for this territory on July 6, 2021, with the adoption of Resolution 2021-147, and by conducting a public hearing tonight, carrying out the ballot procedure, and adopting the proposed resolutions before you, Council will complete the annexation process and the territory will be added to the district. Thank you.
Any comments or questions? Yeah? We'll close the public hearing and bring it back for council action.
So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you please tell me what you were going to turn it into? Did you say you're turning it into a park?
Oh, no, it's an industrial building.
Do we have any public speakers on Zoom?
We do not.
Okay, thank you.
the first action, then, with the hearing being closed, is to a motion to adopt Resolution 2021-227.
So moved.
It's been moved by Councilwoman Panduro. And the second, Councilwoman Bertani. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
And we'll need to have the deputy city clerk count the ballot again.
It's checked yes. Number of votes, 12.
All right, now we have resolution number 2021-228. Motion to adopt would be in order.
Is there a motion to adopt? Thank you, Councilwoman Panduro, and second by Councilman Coniston. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Mr. Vice Mayor, you had a comment to make.
Yeah, I'd like to, before we close the meeting, I'd like to address some of the comments made by our city manager. Mr. City Manager, I would like to request, if you said you would look or listen to our comments and take it into consideration earlier, I'd like to request that you get back to us by October 5th. That's the first meeting in October, so we can mull those over. Sure. Sound good? We can either do it in closed session or open session.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I have actually some ideas that I think came out of some of the discussion. I've got already staff texted some information to them to take a look at some possibilities.
All right.
Based on the information that we've received from you and others.
Okay. So we can do that in October then, for the first meeting.
Yeah, I can give you another report in October, let you know what we're thinking, and get your input.
Okay.
Any other comments, colleagues? We are adjourned until our next meeting on September 21st at 6 p.m. Thank you very much. Drive safely.